Hello, everyone. Glad you made it. This is a special meeting of the North Branford Board of Ed and the North Branford Town Council in the North Branford Intermediate School cafeteria at 6 p.m. 6:11 on Wednesday, February 26, 2020. Michelle, you want to do the roll call? Well, let's do the salute to the flag first. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michelle, roll call.
Mayor Biglio.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Zampiano.
Here.
Councilor Angeloni.
Here.
Councilor Diamond. Here. Councilor Duty. Councilor Fawnin. Councilor Gold.
Here.
Councilor Paternoster.
Here.
Councilor Palicia.
Here. Okay, let me explain what's going on tonight.
Excuse me, before you start, Mayor, could I have the Board of Ed please just go through a name call and check-in, starting with Marcino Frio?
Marciano Frio.
Elizabeth Sienna.
Shauna Holzer, Board Chair.
Carolyn Candelora, Vice Chair. Jana Balsamo.
Thank you.
Okay, let me explain what's going on here. This is an informational meeting about refurbishing or the rebuilding of our high school. At the end of this meeting, we will hear from public comments. Please keep them to 3 minutes. If you want to come back up after for a second time, please wait until everyone else has spoken. Also, there will be other public hearings before any decisions are made. So you have other chances to talk. I'm going to read you I don't know if anybody has the agenda. I'll read you the agenda. First is presentation of QA&M regarding North Branford High School project. The next is meeting schedule. Third is public comment, and then adjournment. I want to know, Superintendent, do you have anything to say? Do you want to say before we get started?
I would defer if Michael Paulus would like to say anything, and I'd ask if my Board Chair has any comments before I speak.
Okay.
No, I
Okay.
guess, yes. I'll just say that we're going to give as much time as we can for QA&M and an interaction for the members of both the council and the board to get their answers to their questions first before turning it off to public comment. And if there's anybody that has to leave, if they don't get a chance to get up to make a public comment, but would like a question, you can certainly write that, send it to me. I'll be here. If you have to leave and can't wait for your turn, certainly you can provide those, and also I'll be available after the meeting for anybody that wants to talk.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Biglione, may I make a suggestion, since we have a fairly large crowd and a 3-minute comment might take us into the wee hours of the morning. If you are in support of a new high school when you come up, please state your name, your address, that you're in support of the high school, and if you have any questions, you can maybe ask them then. But we are all well aware of the state of the high school, so we don't need to reiterate the problem. But I do want to make sure everybody's questions are answered, and I want to respect everybody's time, since I know many of you probably have children at home.
Thank you. All right, let's get started. You guys all set? We're ready.
Without further ado, firstly, thank you for being here in attendance this evening. It's a great turnout. It's the energy that we wanted to have tonight. To hear from you, we have staff members from the high school. We have parents of our pre-K and K system all the way through, with students here being in attendance tonight. So that's a great first step. I've been here as superintendent for 11 years. This is I think the furthest that we've got into this process in my 11 years here. And I thank the council and the Board of Education for investing in the real quantitative research that QA&M has started to do in this process. Rusty Malik is here this evening to share a PowerPoint He's going to move through the PowerPoint, but I think it's going to really give you the information that we're going to look at when we decide, or when the council and the board decides for their recommendation. So without further ado, and before I do introduce Rusty, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening, we will be doing walkthroughs at the high school, our National Honor Society. We will be probably taking about a 30-minute walk with groups, and we will stay as long as we need to stay to get you through. But it's 3 nights next week, 6 o'clock at the high school. Come in through the main entrance, and we'll give you a tour so you can see some of the things that Mr. Malik is talking about. Okay, thank you again, and without further, Rusty, thank you.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Rusty Malik. I'm an architect and I specialize in educational architecture. I've been practicing for over 30 years and that's been my specialty throughout this period. So done many studies, including many high school projects, and we'll walk through the analysis of this particular project. With me this evening is my project manager, Carson Collier, Graham Curtis with DTC, they're the MEP engineers in Civil and Site, and Ken Viega is vice president at O&G. O&G worked with us in terms of looking at the constructability and budgets and phasing of the project. So every option that we present to you, we will actually have an option in terms of how we phased it, how we developed the estimate. We're not going to get into the details of the estimate, although we have all the backup information, but we're going to give you the big picture because we've got about 50-some slides, so I don't want to put everybody to sleep here. But it is a fairly extensive presentation. So quite a few months back, we were asked to really do an evaluation of the school. And I've got to ask you to excuse me.
That mic is on.
My mic is on, yes.
Microphone. Can you hear okay?
I just wondered if everybody else can hear.
Yes. We're good in the back. Can you hear in the back?
Okay.
We're okay? Okay.
All right. So again, excuse my back as I am turning up towards the slides and I'll be pointing to certain things. But we were asked to do an evaluation of the school. And we've broken the project down into really 4 or 5 phases. The first phase was evaluating the existing conditions, which included reviewing all existing documentation. We were down on site. We looked at all the spaces. Many members of our team were here. We looked at every aspect of the building itself. And we developed a report, an assessment of this building and the site. The second part of the project was to develop an educational vision, and we met with the educators. We had a visioning meeting. We talked about the different program elements that were important to the school. And we've tried to incorporate all those program elements into the project itself. After those 2 phases were done, we then developed some concepts based on 3 different scenarios, and then each of those options has a budget estimate and state reimbursement. So once we're done and there's a final selection of one of the projects, we will compile a final report that'll include all this information as we move forward. So when we start looking at the existing conditions, there's a number of items that I've got up here, but I'm not going to go through every one of them, but just to focus on some of the key issues, some of the key concerns that we had. Just starting out, I'll say that when we evaluated the structure of the building, there was some concern expressed by the structural engineers about the integrity of the structure. Not that it's going to fall down, but the capacity of the structure to take on more loads. And what I mean by that is you want to be able to evaluate the structure in terms of putting rooftop equipment up there, if we wanted to add photovoltaics and putting solar panels. So there are different aspects of the structure that we want to be certain will support anything that we do in the future. And that was part of the evaluation. So the engineers came back and said, we can do it, we'd have to go back and reinforce the structure. So that's a little bit of a red flag. It's not that to say that it can't be done. The other big concern is really moisture. You have a high water table in this area, and that everybody knows. But at the high school, you've got a unique issue. You've got the basement's flooded. It's got water in there constantly. You've got a pump running 24/7. So what happens is that eventually will create issues because that moisture will come through the slab and into the building. And that's a major concern to us. So we're going to look at we've actually evaluated ways of how do we address that moisture issue. That moisture issue is just not relegated to that specific area. The water table has caused problems elsewhere in the floor slabs, and actually even the auditorium building, which is not part of this overall evaluation, but we did look at that building. And what we noticed is that the grout at the front of the entrance is eroding, and that's a sign of moisture coming through in the floor slab there as well. So those are two major issues. You know, the typical issue in terms of the building envelope, these buildings and the additions were in the 60s. So back then, the way the buildings were constructed, there wasn't a lot that was done. The windows are single pane, they're inefficient. There's not that much insulation in the walls. So from an energy efficiency point of view, there's a lot lacking in the building. Another major concern is that the mechanical systems that are pretty much original, for the most part, there's some pieces that have been, the boilers, et cetera, that have been replaced, but those systems have far exceeded their expected life. So we're dealing with the systems that are fairly antiquated, that are still functioning, but you're going to have issues with them. They really don't meet the air quality standards, the ASHRAE standards that are now in place. So in terms of indoor air quality and from that perspective, that's an issue. It doesn't bring in enough outside fresh air into the building. So those are issues that we would have to address. Ultimately, we've even looked at the plumbing and some of the sewer lines. There is water backing up. You have issues in terms of just the sewer line itself. I'm told that even as today, there was sewer, and the sewage was backing up in the building. So that's a major concern. To us, it's a bigger concern in that this is below grade, this is under the ground. So when you start cutting that slab, and you've got a high water table, you can just imagine that this is going to be something that's not easy to fix. It's not, I'm not going to say you're unable to, won't be able to fix it, but that is going to be a significant concern to us. From a security point of view, you know, in today's issues in terms of security and meeting the safety and security standards that the state has, you have a challenge. You've got multiple entrances. I think it's over 20 entrances for a small school. So that's a big issue. So anything that we do, we really need to look at how do we consolidate and make that so that there's a little bit more control over who's coming in and out of the building. Another thing that to some people may not be a big deal, but travel distance from one end of the building to the other end is about 800 plus feet. Now, I've looked at high schools that are sprawling, we call sprawling high schools, and they're less than that. So that's a long distance to travel. And part of it is because the site is really constrained in many ways. You've got the slope on the one side, you've got drainage on the other side, so you've got a really linear area that your building is located in. And there's not too many options short of going up. Well, if you start going up, now you double that problem that I mentioned right in the beginning, but what happens with the structure of the building? So that's really part of the overall challenge. So needless to say, there are a number of challenges with the existing building. And so as we look at this in terms of what can we do with it, and we talk about construction phases and the options that we developed, we took all these issues into consideration as we developed solutions for the building. We also had some comments from NEASC.
I assure you I had nothing to do with the backup today at the high school. The timing, that is our third backup. The staff is here in the last 3 months, and it's created quite a problem for us. This is just a very brief paragraph from our NEASC accreditation process, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and they come in and do a very rigorous overview and evaluation of our building, of our teaching and learning. And one of the things that's been a common theme is since 2000 and 2010 is the condition of the physical plant with, as you can see, the word sump pump running 24 hours a day. There is a red alarm in the front of the building that if the sump pump defaults and fills, an alarm goes off, a red alarm will signal, and we have to get our custodial staff to get another sump pump in there to get it working again, and it pumps out through the back of the building. This has been going on for over 30 years or more. So these are old problems. Many of you that have graduated from high school are there. You remember the blankets and the sweatshirts walking through, and in some parts of the building it's 80 degrees and 50 on the other side. So this is important information because this is how we are evaluated as a school moving forward and how we educate in the environment for our students.
Thank you. So NEASC is one of the considerations that we have taken, the requirements or their citations that we take into account as we develop any program for a school. And since you already have some feedback from NEASC, that's certainly something that we've tried to integrate into all the approaches on the project. As we said, we went through a programming effort to define the amount of space in the program areas that we need. And this is just a slide to indicate that, you know, there is a challenge here. One of the challenges you have as a small high school is that the state has set up a process where you get reimbursement based on a number of students in the school. Unfortunately, what happens is as the number is a smaller number, there's a sort of a unintended penalty for small districts. And what I mean by that is, for instance, because you're a small school doesn't mean you can build a smaller gym. The gym has to be the size that it needs to be. So that's you know, so right away you get penalized because of that. In your case, you also, along with academic spaces, you also put a lot of emphasis in technology and career sciences. So those programs take a lot more space than a normal or an academic classroom. But the challenge you have is you're really offering both those programs to your students. So you provide the academic classrooms and you provide space for career and technology spaces. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing. So when we developed the program, and NESDEC had done an ed spec, we worked with that ed spec to develop a program. We came up with a square footage of about 110,000 square feet. Your current building is around 124. If you add some of the spaces that are in the auditorium and building, then we're around 127,000 square feet. Now you'll see the importance of this later on, but we've really tried to push the envelope in terms of making that as compact a building as possible. And how do we do that to bring the square footage down? Because as we all know, the more you build or the more you renovate, the more the cost is going to be. So that's something that we have that we will see as we go through this presentation. But needless to say, that we spent a lot of time talking with the administrators and the teachers to look at the program spaces that were in there. So we're not going through all the different program elements, but needless to say, I want to make sure that everybody understood that we went through that process. So moving to the meat of the presentation. So we looked at really, once we gathered this information, we looked at three different options. We had one option we called the maintain option, second one which is renovations and alterations, and the third is a new facility. Now, I want to make sure everybody understands, when I say maintain, it doesn't mean that we don't do anything and just repair little things, because you have some fairly significant issues in the school. I'll start out with hazmat. The year of the construction for the school, you know, in the 60s and early 70s, at that time a lot of, you know, asbestos and PCBs were used. So we know that there is probably asbestos and PCBs in the building. Now there's been some abatement done on the asbestos side, but not on the PCB side. So that's something that we know we'll have to contend with. And that's a disruptive process, because to remove PCBs means you've got to, you know, remove floors, you've got to open up buildings, you've got to take the caulk around the window surrounds. That means the windows have to come out. And some of it doesn't really matter because you're going to replace the windows anyway. But it's invasive in the sense that the PCB permeates into the adjacent masonry. And so then you have to start removing the masonry as well, because you have to test it to get to a point where there's a level of PCBs that's under 1.0. So those are some of the challenges. And our approach to maintain is really do as little as possible, but still meet code, because you want to create, you don't want to spend a lot of money and then have a building that doesn't meet code. And by that I mean fire code, building code, life safety, ADA. We want to address educational deficiencies to whatever degree we can, because in some cases we won't be able to address certain aspects of it. We wanted to replace the the HVAC system, because that's a big source of, again, a healthy environment. Not just the thermal comfort in the building, but just the air quality within the buildings. And really, nowadays, if you work with the state and you do a project, they're required to do a high-performance building. With that, they want to make sure that you're putting in a system that's a high-performance system, that's energy efficient, that meets a lot of criteria that the state has established. That's one of the requirements of getting state funding. Now, you could opt not to get the state funding, and you'd find yourself still spending quite a bit. The other thing is, try to minimize disruption to education. That's a challenge in any kind of a renovation project. I also added that we want to maximize state reimbursement and to some degree provide a 21st century learning environment. So that's the base parameter that we put down for the maintain option. The other two options, the renovate is new and the new, basically include that option. Now, explaining a little bit about renovate is new, that's a status that the state has. So if you take a high school building, and a school building, and you renovate it as if it was going to be a new building, then you get your current, well, your reimbursement, I think it was 2017, 2018, they haven't posted the latest reimbursement rate, was 51.07. So what the state said is if you do a maintenance type project, then you don't, anything that you're repairing and replacing is not eligible for state reimbursement. And that's a big chunk of change. Mechanical systems, that means a lot of your mechanical systems are not eligible for state reimbursement. So you have to keep that in mind. So the state said is if you go through a process and you make the building as new, as if you wouldn't have to do anything that has a 20-year life, that's how they define the as new category, then they will give you the 51.07%, that's your current rate, and you won't be penalized. In other words, the ineligible costs will be minimized. So that's what Renovate as New does for you. It really is a way of renovating a building completely and getting the most state reimbursement for it. And then the final option that we looked at is a new facility. You need to understand that the state also said in a new facility, you get 10% less reimbursement. So the three categories are maintain. Maintain will have lower reimbursement because you are actually not renovating it as new, so anything that's considered replacement, repair, anything that starts with an R is not eligible for reimbursement. Renovate is new, where most of the building is renovated, is eligible for reimbursement, and then of course the new high school, which it's fully eligible but at a slightly lower rate. So what I have here is a chart, one of the standards that the state goes by. And what they do is they say, okay, we take a number of students and then we factor it into this the schedule that they have for square feet per student, and you determine an allowable square foot for the building. In our case, we're using 524, which is the current student calculation, the current student enrollment, based on an enrollment projection that was provided to us. And based on that, you're eligible for 97,726 square feet is eligible for reimbursement. So right away, we know that that's going to be one of the factors. I mentioned earlier on, when we were doing the program, our gross square footage was at 110. That nets out to about 107,000 square feet. So I want to point out that we're about 10,000 square feet over the state, the allowable number. I also want to point out that this calculation has nothing to do with education. When they developed it solely for the purpose of reimbursement. So if you want to build a school that's programmatically appropriate for that district, you more than likely would not achieve the standard that they've established. Where it does make a difference is if you go into schools that are 1,000, 1,500 students, because the values are there, the square footage is there, you're able to maximize the space utilization of classrooms, then you're able to really work within those guidelines. But what our challenge is going to be here is the fact that our school, we're dealing with a smaller number of students, and therefore the allowable square footage is a lot lower than, it's lower in terms of what you need to do programmatically. I also want to point out that the projections are next year enrollment drops to 499. So we pointed out that 499, that number, allowable number, drops down to 93,000 square feet. So that's an important aspect of how you proceed. You may choose to not move forward this year to next and go forward next year, but you should be aware that that's what's going to happen next year in terms of the impact on your reimbursement. So, having said all that, I'll start going through the building itself. This is just the existing site. North is up this way towards the parking lot in the back. As we mentioned, I think I mentioned in the beginning, one of the challenges that the high school has is that there's really no sense of identity. You come off Foxen Road or Route 80, and you look around and you say, where's high school? We know where the middle school is, where the intermediate school is, but nobody knows what the high school is. So, you sort of find your way into the back and you discover that that's where the main entrance to the building is. It's a challenge, and I guess that once you get used to it, it's fine. You know where the building is. But that's just one of the challenges of the existing school. You do have this drainage right here, which in today's environment, when you've got all these mosquito-borne illnesses, et cetera, that are coming up, that's to us a concern. So what we did is we did meet with the town planner and wetlands person and discovered that there is a way, because a lot of this is drainage that's coming from wetlands around the site, and it's in concrete pipes below the ground. So what we asked is it possible to extend the pipe sort of outfalls right there? Can we extend that 54-inch line all the way to the wetlands, to right there? And the answer was yes, that they thought that that is an acceptable approach. We'd have to sort of offset the wetlands we're removing by adding wetlands elsewhere. But that's an approach that would work. We think it's important to do that because just the proximity and just the fact that this water is running right there by the school and probably contributing to some of the moisture coming in, the water coming into the building itself. There's parking in the back here. This is the main entrance to the school with some visitor parking in the front. There's a parking area as well over here, and of course the connector that goes across from the diamond into the auditorium building. You come into the main building right there. That's the gym. That's the auxiliary gym. It's a very linear building. It's also a very inefficient building. For instance, the diamond is a single-loaded hallway. By that I mean only one side of that hallway has program space. The other side has a courtyard. Now, it's always nice to have natural light coming into spaces. That's something we try to achieve. But in this case, it becomes extremely inefficient in terms of how you're using your building. So hence, your building grows, because if you were to have spaces, program spaces on the interior of that hallway, that would be, there would be no additional hallway space necessary. It would just be program space that could be added. Unfortunately, it is, that's how it was designed, and that's what we have to deal with. But this just gives you a big picture of the site itself. So our first option was to really look at the maintain approach. And we started this by saying, okay, what can we do? How much of this building can we maintain? We know we're over square footage. The existing building is about 124,000 square feet. We only need 110. So we really need to look at how can we downsize or right size this building. So that was part of our challenge. We knew we had to replace the MEP systems. We had to look at the hazmat and remediate it. So I'm not going to go through all the points there, but needless to say, everything that we had identified for the maintain option is what we tried to achieve in this particular approach. So we looked at, well, what are some of the ways we can address this building? You have to also understand that as we look at these designs, as these plans, we've got to make sure that the school continues to function. And that's one of the biggest challenges. When you've got a school that's operating while there's construction going on, you have to understand how to zone it, how the mechanical systems, the new systems are going to be brought online while the old systems are taken offline. how students will go from one space to the other while contractors are on site. And the cardinal rule is you do not let the construction and the education commingle there. So that separation is really one of the tenets of this approach. In this particular approach, what we looked at is, oops. Okay, go back here. We looked at what do we do. One of the thoughts we had here is that we look at starting to demolish and remove some of these spaces back here. It does two things. One, it takes out some excess program space, begins to right-size the building, which helps increase the reimbursement. And secondly, it starts to reduce the overall distance that students are traveling to get from one point to the other. We do know that there's excess classrooms in some of the spaces, so by right-sizing the building to whatever degree we can, we're able to address multiple items as such. We also looked at, this is where the locker rooms are. So in that case, our approach is to really tear it all down. The locker rooms themselves are in very, very bad shape. They don't meet any Title IX criteria, any handicap accessibility criteria. They're in just very sad shape and need to be replaced. But then we have the challenge of the moisture, the water underneath it coming through. So the approach here was to remove that entirely and then rebuild it in that location. The location is fine. It's just a matter of building it in that location and also accommodating it in a way that we meet Title IX. So the girls and the amenities for the girls are the same as the amenities for the boys. So that's what you're seeing here in the building. The other thing is, what we're seeing is that the media center, which is really 3 classrooms that were opened up to create the media center, it's really not an appropriate space for a media center. So what we've looked at is actually building out right on the other side of the media center to create a wider space, a space that's more appropriately designed for a media center, a learning center for the students. So these spaces free up other spaces as we develop the plan. And then again, you'll see some of these areas that are in red that we're demolishing. And the reason we're demolishing, for instance, this area up here, which is where the administrative offices, the nurse, and so on are, that's an elevated area, which actually creates accessibility issues. I know that there's a lift there, but there's always a problem trying to get that lift to operate. So by removing it, and we know that we have to reduce our footprint, we're able to address both those issues at the same time. So that's a sort of a big picture of how we were approaching the maintained option. From a building point of view, you can see, the gymnasium stayed where it is. We've expanded and fully replaced the locker rooms. We demolished the cafeteria back here, but we took the auxiliary gym or the fitness center and built the cafeteria right there with the kitchen next to it. It's now consolidating the building. That space is appropriate. We found other space for fitness. We relocated some of the classrooms. For instance, in this case, we moved art over here, and then we refurbished some of the areas on the north side for the technology, tech ed, and career sciences programs. So a lot of shifting of program spaces, but we were able to consolidate it and address all the program issues. Were we able to get a 21st century school out of this? No. But those are some of the compromises that you work with as you look at different approaches to an existing building. One of the challenges is that you have the auditorium right here. There's that link right there with the auditorium, so that's a very critical aspect of anything we do. But you'll see here that the distance here is all of a sudden, this used to be like, so we're down to about 800 feet right there, 625 feet right there, which is reduced by, I think it's about 35 feet in this particular scenario. The other thing we also looked at is, what do we do with security in the building? A key component here was when we relocated, we also relocated the administrative offices over here, where the media center currently is. We then created a secure vestibule so that anybody coming into the building, after the students are in the building, would come through a secure vestibule that is monitored by the administrative offices. But you can see that right away that we've reduced the number of access points down to 10. So we're going from over 20 down to 10. And we've also then looked at creating internal circulation points. And the reason we do that is because in any building, you zone the building. You zone it for community use and you zone it for academic use. And the goal would be to not have the public, the community go into the academic zones after hours, because it's just that there's that much less security of those academic spaces. So by putting these points within the control points within the hallways, you can actually limit the access, but have all the major functions available to the community. So the community uses the media center, the gymnasium, they use the cafeteria. So all those spaces are still accessible through a community entrance here or there. But beyond that point and that point, the building is secure for after hours use. So those are just some of the thoughts in terms of how do we make this a more secure building as we move through. Now this diagram tends to be a little confusing, but really what it's about is how you build this building. And we're not defining every phase of this project, but what we've identified is that we build it in a number of phases. So we take this section of the building, and that would be phase one. We've renovated, we've added the media center, and we've renovated the locker rooms. We create the kitchen, cafeteria, all while this other space is still available to us. Once that's completed, then we move to phase two and so on. I'm not going to go through every phase with you, but that's the thought process, and that's where with Ken and ONG, talking about the constructability, the mechanical systems, how that would all get integrated was very enlightening in the sense that it also feeds into the next issue, which is, well, how much does it cost? Because there's an impact for doing phased construction, and that impact, many times is very significant. I will say that in many school districts, they'll say, let's bring portables onto the site. Well, you have challenges even just on your site itself. So putting a portable somewhere, it would be a challenge. But the other thing is we find that portables are $140,000 a piece. So by the time you bring in a whole bunch of portables, you pay millions of dollars for nothing, in essence, because at the end of the day, they're removed from the site, and you spent a lot of money for temporary housing, basically for the students. So, we try to work it in a way that we use existing space and phase it in a way that we create swing space in the building. One of the good things is that your building is oversized for the number of students, so it allows us to really work around that in terms of creating swing space in construction. So this is just an image of what the building. It doesn't look much different. There's no entrance. This is the area of the locker rooms that would be renovated. The media center as it's expanded, and then over there with its fitness and administrative offices. Again, in the front of the building, not a lot of difference. So it's a maintain option. We are replacing all the windows. We're doing whatever we can to the building envelope to make it more efficient. But that's the extent of the work that we would be doing. Spaces like the media center, by expanding it out, we now are able to do something in the media center, make it a more appropriate space for education. And so this is just an image of how that space, we modeled all these options. So this is just a design concept for what the media center could look like. So the other thing we look at is, well, what is the energy efficiency of this building? So what this chart is all about, as you can see, there's a way of energy use index. What this does is that these are calculations that you can do based on your energy utilization that rank you into certain categories. And depending on the type of system you then introduce into the school, you become more and more efficient. right now you fall right into the national median, which is 73 kBTU per square foot per year to those calculations. Now, what we'd like to see you do, and in order to try and achieve a high-performance building, you really need to be down here, at the VRF, DOS, down at the 40 rather than the 73. Now, there's a direct impact of this. Yes, you need to replace the systems, but there's going to be energy savings that are going to be developed. The approach to these projects is that the buildings will be air conditioned. So that's a baseline as we in the design, that all the buildings, any option will have a fully air-conditioned building, because with the climate change and the environment that we're in, we're dealing with so many variations in temperature that we have to be aware of what's going on with the environment and plan for things such as air conditioning. Plus, we all know what it's like in May and June sometimes, and even in September. And more and more school districts use their buildings year-round. So that's something that we've considered. So both option 1 and 2 are going to be based on a VRF DOA system to get us to a high-performance building. So now what everybody's always interested in, what does it cost? I know we've talked a lot about it. We've talked about a lot of different things. But what happens here is you're spending a lot of money because there's so many things that need to be repaired and replaced in the building. And we used an approach where this was a single project. We've also done analysis with other communities, but we do these as smaller projects and say, okay, we'll do this part of the building first and then the next part. The problem with that is trying to define those projects and then also trying to understand what the escalation is going to be, and then understand what the reimbursement is. The more you break up your projects into small maintenance-type projects, the less reimbursement you get from the state. So in our effort to maximize state reimbursement, we thought it was best to do this as one large project. We could break it up into smaller projects. What I found is that actually just extends the time frame for construction. It extends disruption to the building, and the costs generally are much higher. So in this case, we end up with a project budget of $54.86 million. We end up with a reimbursement around $12 million from the state. So you saw that your rate is 51%, but because there's so many things that are ineligible, and even though we're removing parts of the building, we're still over our state standards. The net impact in terms of reimbursement is around $12.86 million, with a net cost then at about $41.99 million.
I noticed going through the slides, you didn't address the water issue at all. Would that be addressed in this scenario?
No, it is addressed.
Okay.
So, but in the maintain option, we're going to address it we're not going to replace all the slabs. What we would do is the identified areas such as the septic lines, that we would open up, the goal is to open up that septic line and then replace it and put in new slabs. The challenge is going to be, and then we'll have to put in sort of a topical application for moisture mitigation. That's a limited time. It's a 10-year warranty on the topical applications. It's not a permanent solution. And we're also including in this cost the basement. So taking that, when we tear down the locker room, we would fill in the basement, we would vent that space, and then we would do the appropriate things that would be necessary to mitigate it. Can we say that that's going to be 100%? No, over time. Moisture has a way of just finding its way into the building. So we'll do sort of belt and suspenders types of an approach to that, but it is included in this.
And then just one more thing. I'm sure you evaluated it, but what was the condition of the roof?
The condition of the roof, we are looking at replacing the roof down to the deck because there are parts of it that will replace, and so by the time we get the project underway, we want to make sure, depending on what we do with rooftop equipment, there's just going to be so many things happening that by the time you're all said and done, you're best off to replace the roof in its entirety.
And that's part of that.
That's part of it.
Thank you.
So That's option one. We also developed sort of a comparison of the three options. And what you'll see is we've got some reds and yellows, some greens, and then, you know, but it basically it says, what are we doing to ultimately improve this building? You know, we're not changing, we're improving the security. So let me focus on the positive things. We are making it more efficient. And well, there's not a lot else to go on.
He's going to focus on the positive. He said one thing before, I don't have much else to go on.
Hazmat to mitigate, it's at least taken out. So, I mean, the story is right there. You know, I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to be blunt about it.
Yeah.
But those are the challenges that you have. So then the second option was to look at it as a renovate as new. And renovate as new is really that the building as we looked at it for a maintain option on steroids. So now we're going to take, and every space is going to be impacted. The complete update of the entire building. In option one, there were some rooms that we were just going to do minimal work because, you know, the floors were fine, and we would maybe just replace the mechanical system, maybe not paint every wall. So there was a limited amount of work done. But in this particular approach, we're really going through and looking at every nook and cranny and saying, okay, how do we make all of this, update all of these spaces? This was a little bit more challenging, and we looked at several options. I'm just going to point out a couple here. We actually looked at saying, okay, we want to make this building as small as possible. So one thought was really build an access way right here, since we knew we could enclose that open wetlands drainage, and then do a rather drastic approach of really putting a big addition, two-story addition, right next to the auditorium. It just turned out to be just too disruptive. There was too much work going on, and it began to, the numbers started to climb in terms of what effectively we could do. So at the end of the day, we looked at all the different options, and we said that's really going to be, it's not worth the money that would need to be spent, and the disruption to education, because the students would still be in this part of the building. How do they get to some of the program space that's in the auditorium and so on during construction, especially with this first phase right here going in? And because the site is so tight, there were not too many options. So we looked at that, but we said that would not be the approach. So then we looked at taking the sort of the maintain option, but saying, okay, let's get more invasive there. Let's do something slightly different. We looked at creating an identity to the building. So number one, we said, okay, as you come into the site, maybe if we can create an entrance right there, so one can see that entrance to the building and say, okay, that's the high school right there. Now that was one issue that we tried to achieve. We also try to use the courtyard. Now this is not an easy thing to do, but to build within the courtyard and to use that space for some program right there. Demolish a lot more of the building back here. Create a cafeteria space up here with the addition. And then do some of the, still do the renovations to the locker rooms and some of the other spaces throughout the building. So that was the big concept, big picture concept there. And that's how we began to develop it. The challenge was here, it did give us the opportunity to provide a dedicated bus loop right there on the site. There's parking here. It's a little easier to construct. There's a construction staging area right there. And then you can see in the courtyard, there's some construction there as well. By creating an entrance here, we then said, let's look at this space right there for parent drop-off. So you're separating the parent traffic and the bus traffic, really at two ends. And this space where the current entrance is, that became more of a service type entrance and parking.
Rusty, just so they know, we're not going to drop the children in the wetlands.
No, the arrow is pointing to the drive right there. And in this case too, we would still eliminate that drainage. So even though we see something there, that would be enclosed. So in all options, we think that's the appropriate thing to do, to move that wetlands as far away from the existing building as possible. From a parking perspective, on option one, we didn't have any impact on parking, so we didn't gain anything, and that is an issue because you are challenged when it comes to events and parking. And option two, we really didn't gain any space as well. When we lost some parking along here, we gained some in there, but the net was sort of a net parking neutral in this particular approach. From a plan point of view, what you see is as you come in, now I'm going to jump back to the other slide. That's the entrance point of the diamond right there. So as you move forward, you can see that there's that entrance. So now we've created an entrance off the diamond, and then we said, okay, we move administrative offices, guidance, and some of the support spaces right in that vicinity. But the media center in the courtyard, it's a 2-story volume. It gives us a lot of space. It frees up a lot of other space for space like expand the building right here for technology, education, art. So a lot of juggling of spaces to make sure everything fits, but consolidating the overall building itself. You can see fitness office, fitness spaces right here, the gymnasium unchanged. And when I say unchanged, it's from a perspective that stays where it is, but all the equipment and anything that there are some maintenance type issues that need to be addressed in there. All of that would be addressed, including access to the locker rooms, making sure everything is handicap accessible, providing appropriate bleachers and so on. So programmatically, everything fits in here. What I would want to point out is you can see that all of a sudden from this end to the building to this end, we're down to 585 feet. So, over 200 linear feet of reduction in the overall length of the building. In this approach, zoning the building, this is the community entrance right there. And so the gym, the cafeteria, the fitness area is right all in this area. The challenge is that the media center is on the other side. So as I said, sometimes we can achieve certain goals. In this particular case, we could have put the media center further away, but then the challenge was, do you want it closer to the academics or do you want it closer for the community? So in our thinking, academics, were number one priority. So the media center is most appropriately located adjacent to academic classrooms, and so that's why it was located in this part of the building where most of the classrooms are, and not over on this side, way on the far end. And it can still be accessed from this main entrance, and you'll see, let me just go to the next slide, that when we look at how do we make it more secure, we did create some internal control points so that you could access the media center as well, except it's not, the difference is there's one entrance here, and then this entrance is also used as a community entrance for access to the media center. But once again, we thought about reducing the access points to the building, control within the building, and I think on the last option we were at 10, we're now down to 9 with some interior access controls. This is a little bit more challenging because we have 2 levels and we have stairs that connect the 2 levels, so that interior access control required a few more interior control points. But most of the time, that's less of an issue than the exterior control points from a safety and security perspective. Phasing, once again, multiple phases. In this case, we have over 6 phases. Very complicated. We're doing some renovation on the lower level, some renovation in the later phase on the upper level, just so that there's the ability to have education occur without a lot of disruption. The idea being, ideally we want the 2 volumes to be in the same phase, but in this case we'd have to plan in a way that we would bring the utilities to a certain point, and then when the next phase is renovated, then that's where that facility would be extended. So ends up adding some cost to the project, but that's part of the challenge of creating a renovated school. So here's an image of the building. You can see there's the new main entrance right there, auditorium. So you still come through the building. Then on the media center is in the middle, and the far side is the cafeteria, the gymnasium, and the other support spaces. So this is just an image of what the school could look like. It's just a modest modification to the front that give you a sense of identity in terms of access to the building and identifying the school itself. That two-story media center, as you mentioned, there's space on the upper level, so you can. This is, so you'd be able to look into the media center from the hallway up above. Once again, from an energy point of view, it's no different than what I presented before. We would be looking at a high-performance building. In this case, because it's a renovated new project, the state will require that. In the option for maintain, if you broke it down into smaller pieces and into projects that were less than 4 or 5 million, you might be able to get away without doing a high-performance building. I wouldn't advise it, plus you wouldn't get reimbursement. So, this approach is would be identical to the maintain option. So, when we look at this as renovated as new, hard costs go, there's a lot more work that's being done, and so the budget is now way up. It's gone up to 61. We were at 54 and change on the maintain option. Now we're at 61.8. But the other thing I want to point out is you also went up on your reimbursement. So we went from like 12 million to 23 million, almost 24 million. So even though we were spending less money and doing a lot less work in the maintain option, in the renovate as new option, we are netting out lower than what we spent on the maintain option. And so this is part of the fuzzy math that we do with the state, where we figure out exactly what's eligible for reimbursement and how how it's all going to factor in. There's an aspect here for very significant, for a reason that typically, it used to be that we would file our projects with the state, get them approved, file them, and there was not a lot of debate about what you wanted to do. The state has changed its approach to projects. What they want to do is they want to meet with every district prior to the application being filed. They want to see what options you looked at, and they want to weigh in on what they would feel comfortable reimbursing. So I put an asterisk here because the one thing that really concerns me about the high school is the moisture that we're dealing with, and how the state would view that and the structure, the structural aspect of it. So knowing that those questions are going to be asked of us, they may agree or they may not agree to granting us a renovated new status. And renovated new status, there's a separate application that goes in for renovated new status that the state has to approve prior to the grant commitment. So that factors in. It does have the highest reimbursement, but from a perspective of approval, that is something that we will meet with the state and discuss prior. So I don't want to mislead you in saying, okay, this is the way it is, that it's going to be, because there's still that important factor that's to be discussed with the state.
Option, you don't have to go through all that approval?
I'm sorry?
For the maintain option prior, you don't have to go through all that approval?
Well, they may weigh in on that as well.
I was going to say,
right.
Same
So
issues.
we've been sort of aggressive with the maintain option. Usually anything that's code related is eligible for reimbursement. So for instance, if you did nothing but try to do just code work, you could try to be eligible for that work. The problem is you really just can't do the code work because hazmat has to be done, and then mechanicals are impacted. So it's a sort of a snowball effect as you go through the process. And so at the end of the day, you really come back and say, okay, we've got to do all these things.
Yeah.
So when we go to the state, we will have to discuss all three options with them.
Okay.
They'll weigh in on each one of them, and believe me, they're not shy about what they think they'll support.
I'm going to guess not for $40 million.
Right. I mean, they may come back and say, we're not going to give you $12 million. We're not going to be considering certain things eligible, so that number could be lower. But at this point, we based it on what we thought was achievable.
Okay.
We didn't want to underplay it. I don't want to present it in a way that skews this. We're trying to be as sort of fair with every option. So we're not trying to. We don't have an agenda. If you pick whatever option you want, that's best for the community. But we want to just present the facts as they are.
Appreciate that.
So here, let's look at the comparison. A lot more. There's fewer red in here, but there's not a lot of green. And that's, hopefully, that's ultimately what you want to achieve. We're improving safety and security. Site circulation is moderately improved. Things such as travel distance is improved, definitely. The energy efficiency, high performance, yes. There's still extensive demolition work that needs to be done, and the impact of hazmat is high. So it's marginally better, but you're also spending a lot more money. So then we look at the third option, which is the new school. Starting out, as I mentioned earlier on, 10% lower reimbursement for a new school. So that puts you at somewhat of a disadvantage if you're starting out at 41.07%. But the good news with the new school is everything pretty much is eligible for reimbursement. There are still some ineligible items, but they're like, we base that on 1 or 2% of that cost is ineligible. And that's typical for most schools, and we would, once the details are established, we would know that and more. So as we budgeted these projects, we were a little conservative in our, we didn't want to get too aggressive. For instance, all contingency is considered ineligible, but the reality is when you expend that contingency money, it becomes eligible. But for calculations here, it's presented as ineligible. So when you see that reimbursement, you can see that number could go up because most of the time the community spend that money on eligible work, not ineligible work.
Right.
So here, once again, we looked at where to put a new school. And right from the outset, one of the challenges is as you build a new school, you know there's the connector from the existing auditorium to the building, and that's an issue. And we certainly had a discussion about that with the faculty and the teachers and administrators. And so that's considered in this overall approach. But one option was to put the building on the north side. Okay, it's minimally disruptive, but it's really the building is a much larger footprint than that one can anticipate. It is, in this particular case, a 3-story building, which helps to reduce the footprint of the building, which is a good thing. But as we looked at this, saying, okay, we build it, one of the challenges now are really far from the auditorium and just those programs that are housed within the auditorium building. So that's one of the options we looked at. The other option we looked at is to build right over the new tennis courts. So the point is that we didn't want to leave options open so people came back and said, well, you didn't look at this. We tried to look at, short of saying we're going to build it on the track, we try to look at the viable areas of the site that made sense. But, obviously, the idea would have been to just demolish the whole building and build it right there, but that's not something we can do because we do have an existing building and the school needs to continue to function. So this option was looked at and did not go in this direction. And we picked the third option, which is moving a new building really closer, right where the fields are, at the closest point to the auditorium. So there's a connection to the auditorium, but it's an external connection. So there is that slight difference in that you're going from the high school to the auditorium externally, but it's the shortest distance. One of the ways we began to address that program deficiency, so to speak, is by saying how can we create what we have included in the new building a music, an area for music. So there's a band chorus room in the new building. There's also the design of it. The thought was to create it so that there are smaller venues that could be used by the high school within the existing footprint, within the design of the building, so that you didn't have to go to the art room the whole time, or you went there when there was a major performance going on. But in this particular approach, you can see this became the parent and drop off right there. And so once again, separation of parent traffic and bus traffic. We demolished that. At the end of the day, that whole building and connection will be demolished. The buses come in right here. It's a dedicated loop, so there's no interference with any car traffic. Only the buses come in right here and come through the building. The main entrance is right about there. And then you can see we have a lot of parking. We actually were able to add over 100 parking spaces under this scenario. So there's a significant additional parking. And then we relocated these two fields that are over here on the north side. Therefore, the site costs in this scenario are higher because we're doing a lot more work. We're building new parking lots, we're building new fields, and in addition to the work that we were doing on the other two options. Okay. So from a building planning point of view, you can see you would come in. So this is sort of north-south right there. So there's the main entrance. Administrative offices on one side. Guidance, the media center is right there. Guidance is next to it. It's a 3-story building. The design is a very simple design. So there's basically a bar. So if you look at it, this is one main street going across. And then these other functions are just coming, it's like spokes coming off that main street. So you've got the guidance suite, the media center, the locker rooms, the gymnasium, fitness and music, and then technology, education, graphics. So it's a very simple layout, but it also allows you to have the cafeteria here and this sort of common space, which is a pre-function space for the gymnasium. But that can also function again as a small venue for events. You can open that space up. The idea being that there's no walls between the cafeteria and this commons area, but it's an open space. Now you can add, for instance, a grill that comes down so that you can, if you want, close that off. But in general, it gives you a larger open space where you can have small performances. You can just make it a sort of a multi-use space for the building. So when we look at 21st century or modern school design, one of the key aspects of that is to have flexibility in the layout of the spaces, flexibility in the size of the classrooms, flexibility and versatility of the program areas, and also lots of space for collaboration. And so that's what we've tried to introduce into this particular building. And because we have a sort of a blank plate, we're able to just say, okay, and this is just one concept. We've actually looked at multiple concepts. So this is the one that we're presenting tonight. But it allows us to gain all of those tenets of modern 21st century future school design. And it's done in a way because education seems to go through cycles. You had an open classroom environment at one point, and we closed it up and so on. So we've designed it in a way that it becomes flexible. So in the future, if the way we educate students changes, the building is flexible enough and agile enough to be able to accommodate that. So in this case, the lower level is all the supports functions and life skills and some special education. On the second floor and third floor, again, mostly academic spaces. So you can see, we've put down classrooms, collaboration rooms. There are some open spaces. There are dedicated spaces for faculty. So on each level. And again, and art. So we've tried to locate art on the north side, which is the best light for art in the art program. We've done little things that allow us to simplify the construction, simplify the building, and yet create an educational environment that addresses all the program needs in the building. So one of the things I did want to point out, look at that that distance from one end to the other, 395 feet. So instead of going across for miles, we're now going a much shorter distance, but there's a vertical connection to the building, and that's happens when you go to 3 levels. So one can say, well, if I'm on one end here and I've got to go to that end, well, you're really not going that far. You're still going 395 and up a set of stairs. So you really have to think about it in terms of how students will access the various program spaces.
Rusty, question about elevators and locations for 3 floors with ADA.
So there's typically one elevator we located centrally for access. You can add more elevators, but generally that's adequate for this size building. And we do have a fairly small enrollment. And we've also, but at the same time, we've also got to look at the future, what happens in the future. We need to think about future expansion. If things were to change and enrollment goes up, how do we address that? So, but at this point, one elevator for that this enrollment is more than adequate.
Thank you.
So from a security point of view, again, the number keeps coming down. So the exterior access points are now down to 8. And we have 2 control points right here and here. So when community comes in, the gym is available to them, the cafeteria is available to them, the media center is available to them. We don't count administrative and guidance offices because those are just locked spaces. But you can see it's a very, open environment. It's very easy to navigate. The key to the design is simplicity. I think that's one of the challenges in some schools is just the complexity of how the school functions and the various hallways. This is the main entrance, but we also have this access point, which is closest access point to the existing building. So some of these things can be determined, at a later point in terms of how the space is used. But this is the space where the students get dropped off. From the buses, they come in. Parents are dropping off down this way, so the students can come in here, but it's not that much of a greater distance to walk for everybody to come in. But after hours, you can, or during the school day, you could come in from that access point too. So from a phasing point of view, construction phasing, this is obviously the simplest because if you build the school here, there is disruption because you lose your fields, those 2 fields for evacuation. So that is the extent of the disruption. We're going to use this area over here for staging. Once the building is completed here, then this building is demolished and the fields and the parking are then, going back to the site plan that I showed you originally for this particular option, that site plan would then function as the new building is operational. So here's an image of what the building could look like. This is the wetlands. The parent drop-off is down right there. The bus loop. It's a very simple construction. We've introduced little things like some low walls, some retaining walls. For instance, right outside the cafeteria, there's a dual purpose to these walls. The one is for just a barrier. So if somebody was to try to drive a vehicle, and that wall creates a natural barrier to anybody. So from a security point of view, it's good. But at the same time, it does allow students to be out there, if you so choose, to have an exterior on a nice day. For lunch, they can be out there. These are just some thoughts about how the space could function. Again, another view. So there's the main entrance right there. Students are coming from both sides, and the buses are parking right there. That's the cafeteria space. That piece at the end is the culinary space. Yeah, and another view, perspective view, sort of looking east towards the west elevation of the building. So the cafeteria. It's a 2-story space, and by creating that, this is the second level, so it creates a higher volume. You can see how the gymnasium is way back here, so that's the access to the gymnasium. So all of this can function. It's a pre-functioning space for the gymnasium, and again, there's the larger commons area. The media center is just again a concept designed for the media center. Sort of open technology infused space where different types of instruction would occur, but it's also really, the way we're designing high school media centers are more like a college model, where students are actually, they're very open, and in fact, in some cases, we're trying to creating little cafes, sort of like a, I don't want to say more like a Barnes and Noble type of a space, but anyway, that's, and you certainly have a program that supports the cafe program. So those are things that can always be integrated into these designs. So with this option in terms of energy, we feel the way we've designed it and what we've thought of in terms of the building and the systems themselves, because everything is now new. So we can make the walls and the roof, everything can be as tight and as insulated as we would like it to be. So we believe we can exceed that, the VRF option. We're actually getting to a much lower level in terms of the energy efficiency of the building. But I think the most important aspect of this particular approach, of this particular building, is that we can really start to look at something that's what we call a net zero building. Believe it or not, Kentucky has many, many schools that are net zero. And who would think Kentucky would be building net zero schools and be that progressive? But they are. And they are, that move is afoot here in the Northeast as well. The schools that have been built in Massachusetts that are achieving net zero. And it's really not a lot more that we're doing to our buildings. We're just making them tighter. We're looking at geothermal, photovoltaics, and ways of offsetting our carbon footprint. And so we were asked to look at what would it take to do that, to make it, bring it to a net zero. And it adds about $1.75 million to the cost of the project. And that's a project cost before reimbursement. Because you're getting state reimbursement, that would be offset by some of the state reimbursement. We're still finalizing some of the current utility data in terms of cost. But we think that we're going to be under 10 years in terms of payback on the system as, with the net zero approach. But I think that's got to be finalized, and we'll really be able to discuss it in more detail in another presentation. So cost. It's slightly less than the renovate as new. And the main reason is because in the renovation and maintenance options, you're spending a lot of money in phasing. You're spending a lot of money in escalation, because those projects are between 36 and 48 months in duration, which is a long time. This project is a 24 to 26 month duration. And so you reap the benefits of that. Your reimbursement is slightly lower. So in terms of the state reimbursement, we're at 21 million as opposed to 24 on the renovated new. But the net cost is at 39.88. It's still higher than the renovated new. So the value here really comes down to what do? Do we put up with a lot of disruption for 36 to 48 months? A lot of students will spend their entire high school time in a school that's being renovated, or we can go in this direction where the new building, there's absolutely no disruption to education in the existing building. We deal with the fact that there are challenges within the existing building, but it's completed in a shorter period of time, but it is a little bit more expensive than the renovation option. So when you start looking at, at the comparison, again, 2 phases as opposed to 5 and 6 phases. Disruption to education is minimal. It's really the impact on the fields. Future-ready school, yes. To some degree, we were able to achieve that in the renovation option. Safety and security, we meet all the standards. Site circulation, much improved, meets all the standards. We actually are gaining parking. Parking, again, increased. We actually end up with 2 new athletic fields in this scenario, so those would be designed with appropriate drainage. So we've because of the water table, those issues. These fields, we budgeted them to anticipate the water table. You know, land use, wetlands proximity, somewhat improved, and then that we're not right next to the wetlands. And everywhere, you know, it's hard to get away.
Fifth from the bottom.
The space efficiency is optimized. We're a high-performance building with possibility of a Vestibule building. Again,
I couldn't
depends
just.
on the community. Impact on hazmat is negligible because we would complete the new building, demolish the existing building, it would still have to be abated, but the impact in terms of how it when you're doing small areas, it's a lot more complicated than when you're doing one larger demolition. Moisture mitigation, we will go in with a very aggressive plan. Actually, you know, we think that the building, when they were built in the 60s, most of them, the moisture barrier was either non-existent or very poor. So the likelihood that the existing building has a good moisture barrier is fairly low. That I would bet that there's none there. So it was fine when we did it that way because we used asbestos in the mastic under the tiles. And asbestos has some great value when you use it in that way, except it causes cancer. So we have the challenge. We don't use asbestos and those types of materials anymore. So we have to address those issues in a different way. And that means creating moisture barriers that are proven and now designed to fully look at water-based plastics and that will not degrade with moisture coming through. And then finally, again, when we look at costs, we're looking at 41.99 for the maintain option, 37.87 and 39.89. Now, there is one other thing that might be possible. We've done it on other schools, which is we would apply for a state standard waiver. We think we've done it on the new school that because of our approach to how small schools are impacted by educational programs, so we would make a case to the commissioner and also the Office of School Construction Grants and Review to get to get either a waiver, 100% waiver, or get a partial waiver. If we were to get a 100% waiver, that number would then drop down to about 37.95. But I can't guarantee that. You could get nothing. Our experience is I was able to get about 40% in New Canaan. I was able to get 50% in North Stonington, 100% in Westfield. But it's all a function of a number of variables. So that becomes part of the discussion when we go to the state to look at what options are the best options for this community.
Now you said a renovate as new would be about 36 to 48 months. New school, what would that be?
About somewhere around 24 months.
22 to 24.
I didn't hear that, sorry. Okay, thank you.
The number goes 22 to 26. I think that's because we're also looking at the fields, because you got to demolish the existing school and then put fields in. So some of these numbers are,
So just correct me if I'm wrong. On the other slide for the new school, on the bottom it said 3% ineligible. Yet the absolute probably soonest we would do this would be 21, 22, which the enrollment would drop, which we would have, it would drop the number to 93,000 square feet and some change, which is almost a $17,000 square foot difference, which actually comes out to about a 15% ineligible.
So in anticipation of that question, I did run the numbers to say what would happen if you took the new school and didn't did not file your application this year, because that's really the critical piece. And I'm going to jump ahead to a few slides. So here's a scenario where we've gone to an application that's being filed next year, next June, with the lower reimbursement. The net cost has gone up by about 2.65 million. And the majority of it, the way we looked at it, is it's about a 4% escalation, and then the impact on the reduced enrollment for space-based standards. Just those two factors alone are what's driving that number. So for us, the next steps are we do have a meeting set up with the state OSCGR on the 25th, where we will discuss all three of these options. We'll come back a lot smarter in terms of what they will support and what they won't support. The director is pretty open. He's come to communities and had a very frank discussion in terms of what, how they came to their decision and what they believe. So if he's asked to do that, I'm sure he would accommodate the community. Because many times people say, well, why can't you reimburse us for certain things? The difference in what the state was doing before and what they're doing now is they've taken the attitude that if we don't think a project is worth renovating, that we're not going to put our money into it, because if it's not worthwhile, you guys are going to come back to us shortly thereafter and say, oh, well, we messed up and now we want to do X, Y, and Z. So they're being very aggressive about that, and they're looking at this long and hard before giving that renovators and approvals.
Just one last question. I appreciate your time. Something that's been a concern over the years and the town has had problems with is flat roofs. And then on the middle school, there was all the exposed equipment and stuff like that. In the drawings that were shown there, is all the equipment hidden, and is, what's your feelings about flat roofs?
If we go with geothermal, some of the equipment will be a lot smaller. We did look at, parapets so that the equipment being smaller, and then also with some parapets. I'd love to say we can do, a gable roof or, and those are not off the table, but they do add cost to the project. We call it a flat roof, but it's really not. It's pitched. It's got a good pitch to it. Roof, if constructed properly, will function. We'll get 25-year warranties on this. So it's not out of question, but certainly it's something that can be considered by, to put, let's say, a metal, pitch roof on the entire building. The building design is such that it's narrow enough that we could do that successfully. The gym area, which is larger and flatter, is a lot more difficult to do.
The geothermal then is in the 60 million? That's figured in,
No,
or is that the one?
geothermal-
Is that the 1 point something
That's the
million?
1.75 additional.
So you have to add that on.
Right. So it's an add-on, but the net on that is in the range of 1 million. Because with the state part of it, when the state, the net, that's the gross without state reimbursement factored in. So the net is, I think, 1.1 added to that number.
So it's a 61.1.
So we will go to the state on the 25th and, certainly report back and do other presentations to the community. And then really, if you were to look at an application for this June 30th, because what our communities do is they will file the application. The state requires that you fund the project before they will actually fund it. But you have the ability to delay that funding. You have to go through, and there are motions that have to be made by the leadership. But if it's a referendum in play, that can be delayed as long as in September, October, November timeframe. You can't go beyond that. If you go beyond that, then the application is void. So if you want to keep the highest reimbursement rate and try to file your application by June 30th, the numbers are there. If you choose not to do that, then you would go to, then we'd have to update the numbers.
So the reimbursement rate that you said on new construction, it's an automatic 10% reduction from...
That's correct.
...from renovate as new. During the interview process, when we interviewed the 4 companies for the feasibility study, all 4 companies had talked about if they built a new school and it was not attached to the auditorium, that would also reduce our reimbursement rate. Has that been factored into this?
So what we're looking at, actually, by not attaching it to the auditorium, we're not factoring the auditorium at all in these calculations for the new school. So that's one of the discussions that we'll have with the state, is that the auditorium in itself reduces reimbursement because it's more square footage. So because we're able to, in the new school, provide adequate space for program in the new building, the only impact would be the auditorium itself. And so at this point, what we are looking for the state is to say identify that as a separate building and not impact the reimbursement. That's again one of the issues that we will resolve with them on the 25th.
And if it goes negatively,
then
then what does that do?
A reduction. There's about $1 million reduction impact on that as well.
Over here.
So I was already thinking about that, the walkway over to the auditorium, because right now we've kind of changed how the teachers teach, and they go over there and they teach at the intermediate level. So how will that impact how we've done that?
If it's a new building, that walkway would disappear. So they would physically walk between the two buildings.
They would walk outside.
I know, but that's one of the
Maybe
reasons.
golf carts. Something.
Tunnel.
But that was one of the reasons that it was
they would-
connected. They didn't have to walk outside. They didn't have to get their coats, so.
So the two new fields that are proposed, are they both grass fields as the existing fields are now?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you offering to?
No, I'm just asking what they planned in their budget.
Might seem petty, but, all right, so we've been having issues at times with the elevator at the high school now. So I look at a 3-story building with only 2 sets of stairs and 1 elevator. I know at Totucket it's only a few stairs, but they have 1 ramp, 1 stairs. Is there any way to maybe get something as a ramp, so if the elevator, God forbid, goes out, that the kids can go up the ramp?
Not on a multi-level building, because it's just you'd spend more money on that ramp, you'd be better off putting a second elevator on it in the building.
I'm just trying to, when the elevator goes
No,
up.
I understand. If we had a sloping site and we could build it in a way that there was another way of accessing, but in this case, you'd either add another elevator, but I would not recommend a ramp to the next level up.
Any other questions?
The moisture problem on option 1 and option 2, do you think you could solve that?
I'm sorry.
The moisture problem on option 1 and option 2, do you think you could solve that, or is that going to come back and haunt us again?
So in option 1, it's not 100% resolved, because what we're doing is we will address it where we know the moisture issue exists. In option 2, we will be a little bit more aggressive than that, because we will scope all the underground lines, and where those lines have to be replaced, we will replace the floor slab in those areas. So where we're doing that, then the moisture issue will be addressed there. But the only option where we can definitively say we can resolve that is just because the high water table is in the new option. I mean, we'll put, we can renovate is new, we'll put a topical application for moisture mitigation. And that's done, that's done fairly commonly now. But there is a given light to that.
In option 3, which is new, you don't feel there'll be a moisture?
No, because we would do actually add mixtures into the concrete one. We actually looked at a belt and suspenders, so that would be one approach. We'd also treat the under drainage under the building in a way that we would draw the water away from the building. And so there's 2 or 3 tiers there that we would actually try to make it so that the moisture will not be an issue.
And you would move the wetlands in option 3?
And we would,
Move the wetlands?
yes, in all 3 options.
All 3 options? Okay.
Did you consider a covered walkway between the high school and the middle school as something, as another option?
That certainly
Is this
is
problem?
a possibility. In fact, it could also function for parent drop-off and bus drop-off in that area, so you'd have a covered access point. We haven't considered that in the budget at this point, but that is an option.
I think I understand that concern on the part of the board, because they just negotiated with the teachers to have more ability for the teachers to go back and forth between the two schools.
And the renovator's new. Is there a possibility that you'll come across an obstacle while you're renovating and it would add to the overall cost? And if the answer to that is yes, does the state reimburse us for the additional cost?
So one of the things we do is we carry more money in contingency for those sort of unanticipated situations. But there are times when you can exceed, if you run into something that's so invasive that addressing it and you've gone too far along in the project that you can't change directions.
Right.
You would have to go back to the state to get more money, and you'd also have to approve that locally. You'd have to first approve it locally and then go to the state to get more money.
But that would also prolong the project, I would take it as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask the public a question while you're here. When you look at all three options, we're talking somewhere around $40 million or close to it. And at the same time, now we're talking about building a police station for somewhere between 7 and 10 million. So I would like to take the time, if everybody doesn't mind, to kind of ask the public, because they have us here as a town council to basically spend your money. We make the calls on that. So I would like to ask everybody here, if you don't mind the way I'm going to ask it, but how many people here would not mind spending $500 extra a year on taxes? How many would not mind?
But you don't know. This is the time. And you don't know what the cost is.
Oh, you gotta stop
that. Not everybody here lives here.
Okay, you have to be resident. I'm just trying to get it, because this is what will help base my decisions on what I do.
So you're saying a new school and...
Right, we're talking 50 million, and we're all talking money.
Yeah, but where's that $500 coming from?
That $500 is not.
It's not real. I'm just giving it because before, when we go to base our decision on this, we're going to actually look at what the numbers will be. In other words, when we actually make a vote on what we're going to do, we will kind of know what it will cost the taxpayer. So I'm figuring now I have this many I'm figuring there's about 200 people in this room. I'm kind of getting so I can base my decision on this. So if it was $1,000, how many people would be for it?
No, we can't.
You can't make these kind of questions.
If it was 3,000.
Teachers that work in a crap hole high school where sewage is coming out, how can you put a price on that?
No, I'm trying to. Okay.
When any of the town council or board of ed want to go into their work knowing that sewage is coming up, my son, he just sent me a picture of the sewage coming out of the bathroom. Who wants that?
Brandy, we got it. We have no idea what the cost is to the
Yeah, I don't know
taxpayers.
where he's
We
getting
have
his
it.
numbers from. I mean, Anthony needs to run the numbers.
My point is, I'd rather hear from you
So
people
what you're
right
basically
now.
saying, it
We
doesn't
don't
matter
have a
what it
value
costs?
on it.
Exactly.
Okay.
For me, yes. For
I'd
my
rather just hear from you
teaching
people,
staff,
that's it. I'd rather hear your comments, and when the money comes up, we'll understand. I honestly don't know where he came up with his numbers. I don't know. So how'd you raise your hands? I can say $50. Who wants $50? Raise your hand. We don't know. We have no clue what it's gonna cost. I'd rather hear your comments, your constructive comments, and the people against it. I'd rather hear that, take that into consideration, and then go from that. This isn't raising our hands to see everything.
This is not something that you're looking to just do because you want better things. You have to do this because you have no option.
Right.
It's going to end up costing the town. It's going to cost the town. You're losing enrollment because kids are leaving and going to private schools or leaving the town. And that's the reason why the enrollment's going down, because they don't want to go to the school.
Absolutely.
I do appreciate that, because now I do obviously know how you guys feel. That's what I wanted out of my question, was the passion that you guys have just given me, and that's what I needed to hear. Thank you.
Okay, let's follow the agenda. You'll get your chance to talk. All right, next we have, are you guys all through?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm ready from the public.
Yeah. All right. Next meeting schedule. Michael, do you have anything? Next meeting schedule, what is?
No, I think Rusty
covered?
laid it out. And-
Okay.
And unless the council will.
Jeff, so when you do come up, could you please print your name on the sheet? We'll have you speak here from the podium, so that way you have a running log. Okay?
Unless you want to discuss, coming back after he meets with the state or before to set up the any type of public informational meetings, that's all. Like you had.
We didn't hear you, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, I didn't get it all either.
I'm just asking about the next item on the agenda being the next meeting's scheduling meeting. I think, as Rusty laid out in the presentation, you're looking at going to the state for March 25th. It's to this body, these two bodies, whether or not you want to convene another meeting, talk about additional public informational meetings, or if you want to wait till after the 25th of March to begin, wait till that information on reimbursement comes to put together a schedule. That's all. While everyone was here, you could decide that, or you could wait.
Okay, thank you.
Marcy has a question.
Go ahead.
Quick question for you. Procedurally, does it have to go to referendum? I was under the impression that the council can vote, and if the council passes it, it does not need to go to referendum. But if the
I think we have to ask the town attorney, because I'm not sure in the charter if the referendum would just be a advisory referendum like the budget is.
Okay.
Or if it's a binding referendum. So that was one of the questions we were going to ask the town attorney.
Okay.
To get clarification on.
Okay.
Our feeling now is it doesn't require a referendum.
What?
What was that, Mike?
Our feeling now is it doesn't require a referendum.
Right, that's what I was.
It's a town council authority.
Okay, next is public comment. If, when you step up, will you please give your name and address? Yeah. Right. Yeah, residents only of North Branford.
I'm not shy. First of all, my name is Vivian Lynch. I recently moved here at the end of October. This is the first or second time I've been hearing about this school building. I previously worked in New Haven, where they had massive amounts of renovation of various kinds. Some were build as new, renovate, option 1, option 2, and many of them were option 3. With the way schools are being built nowadays, you can get more bang for your buck if you're thinking about it in the future. And you can't retrofit old buildings as easily. I've seen it happen too many times. The option 3 looked really good. I would be more than likely willing to pay extra tax money because my grandchildren are going here. And I butt up to Computo Road. I would be a little bit upset about buses all the time coming back and forth, but that would not outweigh what I would want to do. The other thing is, I heard 2000 and 2010 for accreditation with NEASC. That means you're right around the bend for another one, aren't you? Oh, okay. No, it doesn't. And I've worked on NEASC teams. So I know exactly what they look for, and I know exactly what they're going to be asking questions for. So I think for this town's well-being, they would be better off to build a new school and a brand new one with all the bells and whistles so that the kids will get the kind of education they need. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren Danner. I am a resident here in the town. I'm also a teacher, so of course I have a prepared statement for this evening. Tonight I'm addressing you as a resident. I'm a parent of both a high school and a middle school student. I'm a teacher, as I mentioned, at North Branford High School, and I'm also a proud alumna of North Branford Public Schools. From the time I went to NBHS, the facilities have, as we've heard when we know this, they've steadily declined. I wanted to just reiterate a few things that were said about NEASC and just to explain a little bit more about that process. So a few years ago, or a few years after I had graduated North Branford High School in the year 2000, as we mentioned, North Branford High School went through this NEASC accreditation process. So I just wanted to explain, it's a process that's conducted by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges in order to provide clear direction that our school community is striving to ensure our students receive outstanding educational experiences. This accreditation process is repeated, as we mentioned, every 10 years. It occurred again in 2010, and we are in the middle of that process right now. And the results of these 3 accreditation processes over the past 20 years have always yielded the same conclusion, that our facilities are in desperate need of improvement. Another thing I wanted to reiterate, and this came out of what our engineering firm said, is really the need for a viable option to support 21st century learning. That is critical to our students, because we all know at the end of the day, this is about our students. So in addition to deteriorating facilities, very little has changed in the structure of our high school from the time it was built. I can say that during our back to school nights, many of my students' parents who are actually once students at this high school themselves, they will make the same comment, which is, wow, this is just how I remembered it. We cannot let these nostalgic thoughts prevent us from addressing our issues. While the structure of our high school and our classrooms may have been suited for 1960s and 70s educational practices, we've gone through dramatic shifts in our teaching practices to align with 21st century skills, yet our building and our classrooms remain unchanged and have not been conducive to maximize student learning. As a taxpayer, our home values, as we know, are directly tied to the quality of our schools. Not only are our families hesitant about moving into our community due to the conditions of our high school, but as we heard, we're seeing these issues with retaining current 8th grade students to remain in our district. It is really time to give our students in our town a school building that we can be proud of, aligned with 21st century skills that are critically needed for college and career readiness. Thank you. Oops, sorry.
Liz Hoskins. I have 3 kids currently in the school system. After seeing all the numbers, and I attend a lot of meetings to try to keep educated on what's going on with our school systems, this is a no-brainer to me. I don't understand why we wouldn't want a brand new high school. It will bring new families into here. I can't imagine that families that are coming into here investigating our school systems are proud of that high school. There's no way. I think it'll be good for our town all the way around, and there's really such little difference in the prices. I don't understand why we wouldn't want to build a new high school for our kids and for our staff who are dealing with deplorable conditions every single day. Is it possible to ask him what his opinion is? You're in this for 30 years. If you had a kid in this school system, can you just give us some insight? This is your area of expertise. I would love to hear. I'm sure you see schools that are like, okay, this could be a really great school, renovated as new, and save the town some money. Can we find out what your professional opinion is?
Go ahead.
I don't have a problem.
Thank you.
So when we evaluate existing buildings, one of the things we look at is, what are the bones of the building like? And unfortunately, buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s are not really built well. And so that's the issue that you have with this school. So as I look at all the issues in the building and look at how we would try to correct all these various deficiencies, I think there's a lot of room for surprises, so to speak. So if I were doing this, it was my town, I would be looking at a new school. The other thing that's really striking is the numbers, where they are, where they're coming down. That they're so close, and the fact that in the first two options, we're really not addressing 21st century learning. And that's extremely important to building a new school and spending the kind of money that you're spending. So if you just look at that third criteria, you know, it's very clear as to what needs to be done. So, whereas I've renovated numerous buildings, and in some cases the costs are lower, I would recommend in this case that you really should look very hard at the new structure.
Thank you.
Dear members of the Town Council, Board of Ed, and my fellow community members, thank you all for coming out tonight because it's very important that you hear us out. I stand before you today to ask you to support our children, to value their education. Our children deserve to live in a town that values them and will do what it takes to make sure they get the best education possible. With the current high school building, we are doing a huge disservice to our children. The constant building problems from the lack of a working elevator, it's kind of funny at this point, but it's not. Inadequate heating and cooling, the sewer pipe backups is affecting their learning in such a negative way. You cannot actually expect a student to be able to learn when one room is sweltering and then in the next they are freezing. Watching students walk down the hallways in blankets and winter coats should not be normal. For those of you that feel it was good enough for you when you went through the doors of North Branford High School, don't you want better for your children? Don't you want them to always do better than what you have done? Ask yourself, how productive can a student possibly be when they are shivering or sweating when trying to learn? Can they really concentrate on what's being presented to them in that moment? Then the added stress of the constant building problems is an unneeded obstacle that negatively impacts them. They are our future. They might be your surgeon one day. We need to give them the best education possible, and again, it's a no-brainer. It's a new building. I stand before you as an advocate for my two children. My son Jackson will hopefully attend North Branford High School in 2027, and then my adorable daughter Charlotte will attend in 2029. I want them to attend the brand new building that we are going to fund. We will pay more taxes and we will all be okay, because our children deserve this. They deserve this for their future. Please choose to put them first and build a new high school. Thank you.
Could you just state your name, please?
Oh, sure. Amy Ferrati, teacher and president.
Where do you teach?
I'm proud to teach at North Branford High School.
So I am here, my name is Leisha Cook. I am a teacher in Haven on option 1. And we have huge problems. So I'm not crazy about that one, I'm not sure about the other two, but I'll tell you the truth, option 1 is awful. I guess I have a number of questions because I live day to day in an option 1. And I've also seen a number of renovated buildings throughout my school system. By the way, I live on Caputo. So I care about that too. And I have 2 boys in the school system, so I'm like getting it from everywhere. Things like, I think I heard someone say things like a flat roof. I'm looking at the media center, 2-story. I heard the kids from basketball over there. Open system concept is kind of sounds sexy, but if you're working in a library and you're actually trying to teach, that's difficult. So I guess my question is for you on the design aspects of the new building, because it's sounding like that's where people want to go, is how much input have you received from the teachers that are here already? Like, you know, were they surveyed, were they showed the plans? My building has no storage. That's a big problem. It's a little simple thing, but a lot of time architects don't think of where you're going to put the stuff you have, where you're going to store the Chromebook notes or the laptops or the Mac, you know, the Macs or the labs or the iPads. So how much flexibility in this plan is there? Does it include furniture? Is it the Demco stuff, or is it the, you know, like good construct quality stuff that's going to last? So I have all those questions. I don't know if you want to tackle them one at a time or if we even have time for that. Were the teachers asked about this plan? Have they seen it?
So we did meet with teachers, we met with the representative group. This is a concept design phase. When you go into the next phase, if you were to move forward, there would be numerous meetings with teachers. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I know I don't look that old. But it's true. And I've been focused on K-12 education. So I know exactly what the requirements are. That would be the next step when you get into schematic design. You get into agreed detail about how that space would function.
They will have input.
And they have input. In fact, this is not even, this is the first, you know, the interesting thing is, these days we design and we create in CAD and in 3D connection. So everything looks like it's real and it's finalized. Consider this sort of a hand sketch at that stage of the process. You know, the big picture is what matters in terms of the programming of the building itself, and that we have adequate space. The budgets do include furniture. We've looked at every aspect of what could go into a building, and that's been factored into our estimates. In fact, we go rather conservative when it comes to estimates. We have lots of contingencies, because even with new buildings, there are things that come up. So that's why my team here, Ken from the OMG, these guys have done hundreds and hundreds of construction projects. I've done multiple projects with them. They're estimating the parking's work with us very closely. So all these things are considered in the design of the school. But this is the concept design phase. So I want to assure you that certainly, you know, all of those things get considered, will be considered, must be considered, and in the design as it moves forward.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Piercy. I live in town. I have 3 kids, 2 of which are still in the school system. 1 has finished. My question is what would be the reason for the delay in waiting for another year for our enrollment to drop, and then we lose reimbursement money? I mean, I realize that it's, you know, a big project and we want to take the time to do it, but if we wait, you know, we know that the school has been needing it for years. It's not a new question. We know we need a new school. What would be the reason for us to wait so that we basically are losing probably, $1 million or $2 million from the state?
I could only guess that it would probably just be because this is just the inception stage, and that there would be more conversations, more public hearings, revisions to the drawings, meetings with the teachers to finalize stuff, and you know, then it would have to go through the Board of Education, then the Town Council. And I think if we did it this year, it would have to be done by June this year. So
it has to be filed by June 30th.
It has to be filed by June 30th. So just being realistic with how the process and everything, that's a really short time span.
I'm going to piggyback and ask Rusty on that question with your timeline and that June 30th date. There is the opportunity to bypass that June 30th if we go through the necessary steps and have the approval for funding by both bodies, that this could get into the hopper and still be in next year moving forward to keep with an aggressive timeline.
That's correct. And that's why, at one point, we had talked about a potential April, May referendum. But if you were to go, all you need is really to file the paperwork, and that buys you time through into the fall of the 2020. And that's what a lot of communities do when they're this short amount of time. We've spent quite a bit of time, and basically what the concept that the state's looking for is the level of documentation that we've done. The next stage is a lot more detailed, and you know, you really have to go through another process to get to that stage, and that's usually done after you secure the funding and gone to that next stage.
How final, when you file that paperwork, how final do the numbers have to be?
That's why we include a lot of escalation and a lot of contingencies that we have done here. Once you lock in that number is what's going to go into the stage in terms of what gets filed for the approval next year. Now, I believe that if from the time we file that documentation to the November, let's say a November timeframe, there's a reason for some additional funding to be included, that there is an opportunity to do that. Usually there's a small percentage that they will allow you to vary from the number approved, as long as you then have all the local approvals for that to happen.
Did that answer?
Yeah. So that's something. Brandy Little, Old Turnpike Road in Northford. I'm really passionate, if you haven't noticed, for the school, the teachers, the students, and it really hope that the town council doesn't drag their feet on after what he said, getting all the paperwork in and doing what they need to do. I am sure the Board of Ed will do what they need to do. And I would hope that you would support trying to get it done by this school year before it ends. And I hope, our John Flory, as some of you know, he has been our Superman, and he's being put a Band-Aid on everything at the high school, and it's just not fair for him to go crazy like he is. So I really hope that you consider new, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Ortiz. I'm a resident and a teacher. I know almost all of you on this table. Just do it. We have gone enough. Just do it. Pull the trigger. We need a new school. We're losing too many kids. Just do it. Please, just do it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Betty Jo Paternoster. I'll write that down.
Unfortunately.
I told her she had a lot to say last night, too.
So I have just a couple of logistics questions. One is on the projected students. I didn't know that we were losing. I knew that kids go to other schools, but I didn't know some of the reasons for why they went to other schools. So that was new information for me tonight. But one of the questions that I want to make sure I understand, and it's more rhetorical to the folks up there, is, are the next year you're projecting lower students? Have you considered the town's growth goals in that student projection? So I don't know if there's an answer to that at this point in time, but it's definitely a rhetorical question to consider, because the town is doing stuff to try to help this town grow the tax base, grow the people base, but yet we're looking at a decline in the number of students. So that's just more a little rhetorical to think about. But I like to look at things cost-wise as the total cost of what something would be from soup to nuts, from the day you build it to the day that you tear it down and stop using it. So has there been analysis done on what the total cost of these buildings are, or these options are? Because essentially you still do have 4 options. You can choose to do nothing, but there's cost associated with that all the way around. There's a lot of cost. But, looking at building option 1, option 2, option 3, after you do the building, the renovation, there are costs associated. They're going to be different based on what option you're choosing. Like right now, I assume that there's just a huge amount of money being spent towards energy based on the inefficiencies that I'm hearing. How is that going to be recouped and go towards the cost of new buildings? So I don't know if there's answers to that, but once again, it's something I think we need to, it's the way I look at something, the total cost. What's my total cost going to be at the end of year 20 or the year 50 or whatever it is that we, the lifetime that we assign to these schools?
Just Rusty, for retention of, we usually look at between 80 to 90% retention from 8th grade, with our average classes being around 140 students, ballpark in that area. We've made a very concerted effort from the high school to come in and do more with retaining our students. The largest population go to the technical schools, Vinyl Tech, and to Wallingford for the agricultural program. From there, we trickle down to some of the private schools or charter schools in New Haven. We've seen a decrease, and we think that this new facility with state-of-the-art teaching and facilities that replicate what every single town around, if you do and I hope you can hear me, if you do a 30-mile stretch out, North Branford is the last high school standing that hasn't had either a major renovation or a builder's new. You can talk about Guilford, you can talk about Morgan High School, which is brand new. Wallingford is about to go through a major overhaul. All of the New Haven schools have been done. You know that East Haven, North Haven have been completed. All the way down 95 corridor, all the way through, including where I came from, Old Saybrook. I lived through a renovation, it was miserable while I was there. But every other high school moving down and then traveling up Route 9 through Middletown, North Branford is the sole school that has not been touched in years. So do we lose some kids because of facility and some from programmatic needs that we would like to improve upon? We're patching things to do things. Automotive is held in the back of the auditorium. Our music program, and we're off the charts. Come and see our staff work with our kids, and don't think for a second that your kids are not getting an incredible education in their 4 years at the high school, because these people live and die and breathe. But when we talk about equity and what they should be teaching and what our students should be learning in those facilities, that's what we need to address. We have single pane windows. We pump the energy and heat out of the building every single day.
So has a little analysis been done in that area?
We've sent all of our 3-year usage of electricity and natural gas, which we converted at the high school when we were using dual with oil. So they are using all of that data as checkpoints to see what would be the projected payback. And it looks like if we do the geothermal and we put the low-lying panels on the roof, it would be about 7 to 10 years that we might do that.
Shauna Holzer. I'm speaking to you as a mother, an aunt, and a friend. Both of my children are in the school system. My nieces and nephews are in the school system, and many of my friends' children are in the school system. I often sit at the other side of the table, but today I decided to come across, simply to say I support this endeavor, and I would be remiss not to state my opinion.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Portia Amendola. I'm speaking to you as a mother and a community member. I have 2 children in the school system right now, one in the middle school, one in his freshman year at the high school. Any project, no matter what we choose, is going to impact both of their educations as well as most of the people in this room right now. I want to just bring another perspective to the table. I think everyone in this room feels very passionately about the children in our town, the teachers in our town, and the education, the quality of life in our town. When we're looking, we all know that doing something about the high school is not an option at all. It's got to be done. It's overdue for generations. The point I want to bring up to you is that, for a second there. For the value of the town, we're investing a lot of time and energy with like the Economic Development Committee. We have the Sunflower Project. We have that awesome public safety service video with the police and the firemen and many members of our community. We're putting North Branford on the map. And I think that we all know that the largest, most biggest way to do that is to invest all we have in this project and put a new building on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Ianello. I live on Maria Todd Road. I have a 5th grader at Totucket Valley, and I am one of those parents who is currently thinking of sending my kid to private school because of the condition of the high school. I'm lucky to have 1 child, and that's something we could do, but I don't want to, and my son wants to be with his friends. So I ask the community to please build a new high school. It's well overdue, and I think it would be the right move, and that would make us change our mind, for sure. Thank you.
Here comes Liz.
Rusty, just one quick question, only because it came up about the automotives. With the new plan, are there shops built into that plan?
Yes, there are.
Can somebody just tell me what shops are being factored into that?
So we basically try to keep all of the programs, the construction, it's a different approach to the shops. So we have a construction lab, and automotive will continue, there's a digital lab, there's the culinary program that's coming in. So really we're trying to, even with the art, I mean, the dark room is something that's really, most districts are not putting in dark rooms, but that's right now, that's an element that we still have in our planning system.
Okay, thank you very much.
The question was regarding the existing automotive shop that we currently have in the back end of the auditorium. I'm very familiar with it. I was here when we put that in, and it's something I'm very passionate about. So we will continue with all hands-on learning, and we're looking for a strong push in manufacturing for a large population of our students to coexist with our existing automotive. We have Project Lead the Way Engineering. We have a wood shop, and we would keep our traditional photo and art program as well. So we want to be strong in the corners. We want to promote hands-on learning for all active students. We want to retain those students that may go to Vinyl Tech, because we don't offer those courses that are so valuable for career readiness and jobs right out of high school. And I think as the superintendent in this community, I'm responsible for educating all of our children, and with the reality of the cost of post-high school education and job availability, we're doing a disservice if we don't open our eyes to occupations that have wonderful career opportunities and benefits when you exit high school. And that's something that I'll continue to work with on the Economic Development Committee and bringing manufacturing to the high school.
Elizabeth Kaplan, 54 West Pond Road. I don't even know where to start. First of all, thank you so much for this incredible presentation and really opening our eyes to the costs involved. And I was completely floored at how closely, how close they are in difference and how relatively inexpensive it is compared to the high schools around us that just built new ones. I wear quite a few hats here. I'm a passionate educator along with my incredible colleagues in North Branford. I'm a resident. I'm also a volunteer. I'm on economic development. And in part what Portia said, we are trying to do so much to retain our businesses, to bring new business in, to partner businesses with our high school for manufacturing. I've been going to quite a few workshops on this, and we have a huge shortage of highly skilled jobs in the state, and we really want to engage our students and know what the possibilities are for a career, for a profession, if they so choose to go that route. But let's be honest, we have to rip the Band-Aid off. We really do at this point. Teaching is a profession of passion, and it is very difficult when, as you've heard the description, you've seen the evidence yourself of what we deal with on a daily basis. It doesn't diminish our passion. We love the kids. We're there for the kids, but it's very hard to get them to learn. It's very hard for ourselves to adjust to dramatic temperature changes, to have to, if the elevator's not working, which it has not been for a very long time, to have to move classrooms because students have come in on crutches, because you have to obviously service them, so an upstairs class has to move downstairs. It's very challenging. And what I love, one of the things that Rusty said about flexible learning. We want to be able to learn, and students to learn many years from now. This is not a little 10-year approach. This sounds to me like a many-year approach because education changes. And we have to understand this building is going to have to address educational needs for a very, very long time, and that is our hope. So thank you so much for the council and the Board of Ed allowing this to happen tonight, and we really appreciate it. And again, time to rip the Band-Aid off, and we need a new school. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we just move this
Hi, I'm Ron Sienna, and the first graduating class in North Branford High School.
What year was that?
Yep, I'm the second. In 1965, the high school was built on a swamp. So for 50, 60 years, it's still been a swamp. We're considering throwing $40 million into a swamp.
Drain that swamp.
I don't think you can do that because it's been here forever. I'm in favor of a new school. First, let's get that clear. What's our affiliation with this piece of property? What's the cost advantage of staying here as opposed to moving to another piece of property that the town already owns? Maybe it's time for an exodus to a different location in town.
A couple pieces to that with the auditorium location being there, and now with our commitment to hiring 712 educators to go between the two buildings so we can offer more opportunities for our students. We are at such an advantage by having high school teachers who can go down and teach an 8th grade class, so that we don't have to hire a full-time teacher to teach 3 classes, but we can have teachers go back and forth, better service our children, bring more opportunities by a shared staff of educators. So the sky's the limit by staying on one campus. Once we separate and segregate, then we're going to lose those opportunities. Thank you.
Morelli. I live over on Village Street, and I just want to say I don't have kids, and I'm totally in favor of a new high school because it's just ridiculous what they have to put up with, and nothing is more important than education.
Hello, my name is Amy Conroy, and I actually live right on Caputo Road, so my backyard butts up against the property here. I wanted to thank you all for the efforts to make this endeavor, as well as the police department, so transparent for the public. The public tours of both the police department and the high school help us as a community and as parents understand the problems that are really there. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you guys and everybody's efforts that placed that opportunity for all of us. I want to know if there's any health department reports or like OSHA reports for the conditions of the high school as it stands.
We have tested water at the high school, and we recently tested 4 classrooms for air quality.
Okay.
So we do work with East Shore Health Department. If we have a concern, we will contact them, and then we do a lot of private testing.
Okay.
So yes. But when you, I'm going to speak for Rusty, when you look at a building that was constructed in the 60s, and you look at, as everyone has said tonight, the amount of moisture underground, how it permeates, and what gets into a building, I think it's safe to say that it's not an ideal environmental situation to be in.
Okay, thank you. Also, I just want to say that I am definitely in stance for a new building. I think that we see the effectiveness of just putting Band-Aids on the current condition, and I'm also concerned, having an environmental background, that what's going to be uncovered from trying to renovate the current building is going to create much more cost than you guys can foresee, especially with something built from the 1960s. My next question is with regard to the light pollution. So with the parking lot now butting up against my backyard, is the new lighting that's being considered for the parking lot create less light pollution than the current lighting that's present? What kind of lighting is it?
So typically, what we do is, first of all, we go through all the zoning approval processes, and then we have cutoffs so that the light does not infiltrate beyond the property line. And typically, when there are residences really close to the site, we work with the residents, we do photometric data, we provide photometric data, and that's used to confirm that light infiltration will not occur on adjacent properties. So there's a whole process, and because this, especially at night when lights are left on because events go on for quite a while in high schools. There's also approaches where you zone the lighting so that you can certain perimeter lighting can turn off and then other lighting has to stay on. We do have to be very careful that we create a safe environment so that there's no danger caused because there are certain light levels that we have to maintain. But there's a multitude of ways that we can address those issues, especially when it's a sensitive area of the adjacent property.
Thank you. My next question is, with regard to the new property, will there be something that's put in place to stop people from just sitting in the parking lot at night that shouldn't belong there?
I think I can speak to that. That's not an easy answer. Yes, we work with the North Branford Police Department to notify when there are issues back there. It's usually after the fact. We're not there at night at 9 o'clock. We're not there on the weekends for the most part, unless we have an event going on. So it's something that's a little more community-based than just high school-based. We have had conversations about blocking areas from allowing cars to get in, but we have to keep life safety in mind. So it's more complicated than it may sound. But I understand your concerns. We work with the community for those neighborhoods and because the number of cars are back here. we are aware.
My family will go clean up the debris. The Boy Scouts do a good job. It's just if there was anything that we could put in place to stop people from hanging out after hours when there's not a planned event there. And it's only also for the value of your property because they're doing burnouts and everything else at night, which is now going to degrade the investment that we're putting in place. All right, thank you very much.
Scott, are there plans to put in cameras? Okay, but that's part of the new plan for back there too?
More advanced than we have. The question was regarding video surveillance. I'm not going to get into our safety plan, but every building, every parking lot has high-end security with our video. We also share our video with the North Police Department. They have the same screen, and they view every screen that we see in our buildings on all 4 campuses. And they have remote access in their cars because we partner with them with iPads that they can see from their vehicles, everything going on all of our campuses, both in the building and on the outside as well. Okay. And that is included, but it's more expensive in the new high school plan because of advanced technology.
Hi, Marcia Nofrio, 14 Fox Hill Drive. I'm speaking as a taxpayer. For years and years and years, we've heard the infrastructure hasn't been taken care of in town. The infrastructure, nobody's done anything. We can blame past town councils, we can blame whoever we want. You 9 people have the chance to turn it around. You have the chance to change it. Mr. Felicia, when you ran for town council, your comment was at the League of Women Voters, if you want change, vote for me. I'm new blood. Here's your chance. Step up and let's do the right thing and start changing the infrastructure. You can't choose between a police department and a school. You pick one over the other one isn't going to be even considered for another 20 years till our bonding is up. Bonds are low right now. Our bonding is low. It's our chance to do this and do it right. You guys have the chance to make the change.
Just like a chance to respond, seeing I was targeted, which is fine. And you're absolutely correct, and it's something that all of us have discussed. And just for an example, there's been discussions about with the new police department, because we had that meeting first before this one, is just what we're going to do, how we're going to possibly budget money to, for the upkeep of the new police department. Some people have discussed maybe hiring an extra maintenance person so that we actually have a maintenance person on staff to actually take care of it. None of this stuff is solidified because it adds extra expense and stuff like that, but that is definitely a concern for many of us on the town council, and that is something that we're looking at.
I just want to, just add that the PowerPoint will be on our website. I'm hoping by Friday, so the entire PowerPoint will be on our site by Friday. So I have it. Okay, so anything that you want to go back to will be easily accessible to you.
Hi, I'm Tara Lee. I have 3 kids in the school system, and I work at a hospital in New Haven, where that hospital is continuously growing and bringing in new employees who are looking for places to live along the shoreline. And as a parent, first thing I was looking at was schools. With all the new schools in the surrounding towns, I don't know how we're going to compete. And I just had a follow-up question in regards to the police station, and we have 3 options here. Is there the possibility that there will be 0 option for the school? Is that something the town council is thinking, that this may not happen at all?
Let me give you my opinion.
I would not say that.
I've been...
Pardon?
I would not say that. Something's going to be done.
Okay.
I've been... Yeah, Mike.
I lived through no option. I graduated from the high school in the early 70s, so I'm kind of old. But I lived through the renovation of the North Branford Intermediate School as I was on the town council, and I would not recommend that for anything. Doing nothing is worse. Option number one is worse because we still have a water problem. That lower level of the high school used to be a locker room, was shut off in the 70s because it kept on flooding, and it ruined all the equipment that was down there. So my only option is option number 3, build as new.
Another thing, I'm not saying that the school condition had anything to do with this, but I know a lot of the high school teachers, like half the staff at least, was out sick last month. I'm just saying. 20 teachers.
20 to 22 teachers.
Out at one time.
We almost had to cancel school because of the health reasons in our school. This is concerning to me in respect to just health in general. Sewage, mold. I'm having a problem in my own basement with water. Experienced it previously as a president of a condo association, had same issues. And you can't Band-Aid it. And I know it's a lot of money, and I know everybody's sitting there. It's a precarious position to be in. And somebody's gonna get complaint. Someone's always gonna have something to say. But ultimately, somebody's gotta put their big girl panties on here and do something in respect to telling everybody this is where it stops. I have 2 daughters in the high school, and I moved here from Branford. And we have the most amazing teachers here. I don't know how our teachers teach at the level they do here. I can't say enough good things about, and I sing our praises. And again, how many students we've lost. How many families, I've lost count of how many families I know. And I grew up in New Haven. I was a Fairhaven kid, and that was a rough neighborhood to grow up in. And I saw all those schools get, because I worked in manufacturing, seeing all those schools, that good money put on bad circumstance over and over and over again. Not building a new school here and prioritizing it, and I'm not making light of our police department. We have a great police department, but ultimately it's our health, our school, and our town's future. We can't look at it any other way. And I'm sorry, it can't go any other way, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I'd like to answer.
Speak out of
I'd like to answer the young woman. I'd like to answer the young woman that just spoke about the option of doing nothing, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not for that, by the way.
No, I'm not either. No, I knew that. I'm not for it either. I've been through the high school a bunch of times. My granddaughter was there a year or 2 ago. I've been through the school with Scott, John Florio, Kenny Ash. We walked through the building. I saw, and I knew what the school was like anyhow, because I've been in there 100 times because of my granddaughter. As far as I'm concerned, doing nothing is not an option. And doing it quickly, I would like to see that happen. Because these kids are in there and they're cold. They're bringing their jackets and they're bringing blankets in with them. My granddaughter had to do that 2 years ago. This has been going on for a long time. I'm tired of it. Something has to be done, and I'm all for whatever gets done. I'm all for it. It's got to change. That's how I feel. Anyone else?
So my name is Mia Park, and I just started school at North Branford High School as a freshman. And I wanted to say, just from a first-hand perspective, that the problems with the school are definitely a large issue, because to be walking from class to class and smell sewage in the hallway, that is obviously very distracting and kind of gross. And also to have to plan your outfits every day for what classes you're gonna have, whether it's gonna be freezing cold or really hot. It's just kind of getting old, even though I've only been there for 6 months. And I think that even though it might not be ready by the time I graduate in 2023, I think that having a new school would really benefit our town.
I waited to talk after Liz Kaplan, so I timed it right. Good evening. My name is Nicole Esposito LaCroix. I keep the Esposito because that's my T-bird name. I am a parent of 2 children. My daughter is a freshman, and my son is in 6th grade. My husband is also a T-bird, Mr. LaCroix from TVES. We are both extremely passionate teachers. We teach for our town, and now we teach for our children. We teach for our friends' children. My one concern is that how long this process may take. As a teacher and a staff member of all the awesome teachers over here, every day there's an issue. Every moment there's a, don't go to the bathroom, you gotta move your classroom. Every day there's something. So I am speaking for my children, but I'm speaking for my profession. Things need to happen quickly. We can't take time to make these changes, because every moment of every day, we don't know what we're walking into as professionals who are trying to teach the children of this town. Option 3 needs to occur quickly and proficiently. Thank you.
Hi, my name is JJ Argano. I'm a senior at the high school. I'm all in favor for a new school, and I know I'm not going to be going through the new school and going to get to experience it. But back in October, I tore my ACL and MCL, and all of my classes have been moved to the first floor, and I haven't been able to go to the second floor at all. And that's, I know it's a lot of stress on the teachers that have to move the classes, and for the students who don't know what classroom they're going to, because sometimes they change, sometimes they're stuck in the library with other classes. And it's kind of a mess to go back and forth and not really know where I'm going to end up at any time during the day. I'm also part of the Dream Team, who we work with all the younger schools in the community, and I've made a lot of friends doing through that, and me and a couple other students come here for the gym classes and health classes, and we have made a lot of friends, and I just don't want them to have to go through what we're going through, what I've been going through for almost 4 years now. And I just think that they deserve a better school, and anyone else who goes to the schools should be welcome to that too.
And this doesn't usually happen. So living in town for 38 years and teaching in town for 34 of those, I just want to thank you all, the people that are sitting at that table, because this is the first time that I've actually seen people who I think really care about what's happening, and I just want to thank you. And I think you'll do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
All in favor?